Hi there. Today we're going to paint our background black. So here's our pumpkin. We're going to paint it and it's going to look like this. We're going to paint all the way around all the crayon first and around the leaves and everything. And then afterwards we'll just put some little, just do a quick overlayer and put some droplets so it'll look kind of interesting and give it some texture. So before we paint, I just want to look at my picture and just double check that I have good coverage with my crayon. Like if there's any areas, and I know I said to color them really thorough before, so we didn't have to go back and match colors, but like I see a little white thing there and I think this is the color. So I'm gonna clean that up a little bit. And if I see any more in this color that need cleaning up, I'm gonna just clean up a little bit. I see a little white there. And then I think the pumpkin itself is pretty good. There's a little bit of white there. But I've got to make sure I match the colors well because I don't want to use the wrong colors. But my leaves, I'm going to go a little bit. See, I've got a little bit of white in there. I'm going to go a little bit more. I kind of hurried through this a little bit to get you guys on your way because it was taking a long time. It always takes a long time when you're doing careful work. But again, I say it's not a race and you want to make sure you do it well. It's more important to do it well than it is to do it fast, okay? Because the first person done in art isn't always the winner, okay? So I'm going to put a little bit more shading in this leaf with a little bit, oops, I just went outside the line there. It's a little bit careless, so I'm going to expand that. Okay. Yeah, I got to not rush. I'll take my time. And I think I'll put a little bit more green of the light green in here. Yeah, make sure you have a good bold outline. And if you don't, you can come back and do that, but you want like a good strong outline. I'm gonna use this darker green, I think. Because you want to have that good strong wall. We're making the wall of wax that keeps the watercolor out of the area with the color. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I see a little bit of white here. Fill that in. Make sure that you've got nice thick lines on your stem. Remember I said to reinforce them, and so double check that it's nice and thick. If it's not thick, what ends up happening is the black paint will cover the area, or if the lines are just too skinny, you won't see the stem. So the stems actually look kind of thick, and the vine looks a little bit thicker than I might imagine it being, but once I paint, it'll be okay. So, okay, I think that looks pretty good. I've got good coverage here. So I'm gonna get my paints out and we will start painting. Okay, so here's my paint set. Remember, it's important to have either a placemat. I have a piece of paper here and my table won't get damaged, but if you have a table at home that you're working on, if it's wood or something that might be able to absorb the paint, you don't want to just paint right on the surface because it might ruin the table. So ask your mom. I have like some plastic placemats at home that work really well, that I can just set right there and they kind of wait. I don't even have to tape them down. They'll stay. I have this taped down so it doesn't slide all over the place. But remember, we're gonna just paint around everything to begin with. And so we don't have stop and start lines, like we're not gonna paint here, then paint a little here, then paint a little here. We're going to start at one section, and because I'm right-handed and I don't wanna get my hand in the wet paint, I'm gonna start on the left side and work my way across. If I start over here and I happen to lay my hand down, I'm going to get my hand in the paint. If you're left-handed, do the opposite. Start on the right side, and you could put your paints on the other side too if you want. But start over here and work your way across, and that way you're not getting your hand in the wet paint. If I'm left-handed and I start here and I paint like this, I'm going to get my hand in wet paint. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on the opposite side, which is the left side. So I'm going to get in the water, make sure my brush is clean. I'm going to dab it just a little bit, and then I'm going to bring my black to life just by gently stirring it with water. Remember, they're semi-moist pods is what they call them. And so it's compressed paint. It's a little bit moist, but it needs water to come to life. So I'm going to add water. I don't want to come from here and stir all the, it looks really pretty how it's going in there, but I don't want to just stir and wash the paint out of here. So when I'm dipping in, I just want to dab it and come back with here. I don't want to go like this, clean my brush, and then come over here, because then I just deposit paint in there and it's kind of wasting it. In your paint tray, the black is usually the last one. It's usually by the brown. Purple and black look kind of similar when they're brand new. You can tell a little bit difference, but just make sure it's the black you're using, okay? So I'm going to have to keep adding water as I go, but I want to be careful that I don't splatter the paint all over, and I don't want to drip into all these colors. So I'm going to be careful as I'm going there to my black paint. So I'm going to start on the left side, and I'm just going to work my way across. Now, I don't want you to worry about getting it on the table because you have a placemat. I don't want you to leave white there. We're going to paint all the way off our paper. So make sure you don't leave any white on the edges. So you're just going to paint all the way off. And when you get to where the leaf is or the pumpkin, you're going to just use the tip of the brush, and you can touch the leaf. Like if I actually paint on the leaf, see how I just painted across that? I did the wax really well, so it's going to resist. But if I use the paint really thick and I keep rubbing in the wax, it will get black paint in there. But right now, if I just go across it, because I colored so well, it's almost magical. It doesn't, see how it doesn't go on there? But anyway, I want to keep staying with that area. So I'm going to keep dipping in the water to add water to my paint, to keep mixing it. And I'm just going to kind of go around the edges of things and work my way down. If it starts getting dry, or see how it's kind of thin, or it starts getting dry, remember, I don't want to rub and scrub. It's not going to cover it well, and it's just going to kind of mess up my paper. I don't want to scrape my paper because then I'll get those scrape lines. So I want to make sure there's water in my paint, and when I run out of paint, I'm going to keep going back, okay? So I'm going to go back over here and cover that a little bit well. But remember, we're moving a puddle, and we have to have water. We can't have a puddle without water. So if we don't have water with our paint, it's going to be too dry, okay? And it might be too thick. So I'm going to keep going, and I can go, I have to be careful not to hold. If I have to hold my paper, I'll hold it where I'm not painting. Okay, so I'm just moving that puddle. I'm going to show you what happens if I get too dry and it's too thick. If I don't add water, what's going to happen is my brush is going to get, it's going to be dark, but it's not going to be watery enough, and it's going to do the same thing. It might not be as watery, but see how it's kind of dry looking? I have to go back and get water and then come back over here. Okay, so I'm going to, if I need to stir a little bit, I want to be careful I don't drip into the other colors. And I'm going to paint all the way around my pumpkin before I go on the in-between. I think that will keep some good control. So I'm going to go back and make sure I've got good coverage. So I'm just going to go all the way around. And remember, if my paint's getting too, paintbrush is getting too dry, I need to add water. If I don't have enough paint, it's going to look like this, okay? And that's going to be gray. And I don't want it to be gray. I want it to be black because I want it to really show up well. So I have to make sure I keep adding some water, gently stir it. It'll take a little bit of stir time, a little bit of patience. And then it's thicker like this, and it's more like a puddle. Okay, so I'll probably have to hold my paper somewhere where it's dry because my paper might move. You'll notice whenever we paint on paper, see how it's kind of lifting here? It's kind of buckling. I don't know if you can see that on the video, but normally I don't want to pick it up, but it's kind of bending. And what's happening is the paper acts like a sponge, and when a sponge absorbs water, it expands. So it kind of goes like that. And that's what happens to your paper. And what'll happen when it dries, it'll shrink back down. It might be a little bit wavy like this, but don't worry if it's lifting up a little bit. As you're, when you're done painting, I didn't tell you this ahead of time, you never want to pick it up like this because the paint might all run down. So you always want to keep it flat. So make sure you're keeping it flat and you don't pick it up and say, hey, Mom, look at my picture while you're painting. You want to wait till it dries to hold it up. But painting all the way around here. And remember, I don't want to leave any white on the edge there, so I want to come back and cover that. If I have like that white, I want to go right off the page. Okay. Right off the page. So I'm almost all the way around. If you've added, if you haven't stirred enough and you've added too much water in some areas, you might find, I'll do some of it light so you can see, you might find once you've painted the whole thing that some of it might be lighter and you need to go back and darken it. We can paint a few layers if we need to. It won't hurt anything, but I'll just leave a little bit of that light and you'll kind of see. And as it dries, you might see darker and lighter areas, but see how it's a little bit lighter there. I'll probably come back and deal with that later. Okay, once I've got the whole border of my pumpkin, I'm not going to paint directly on any of these crayon areas. I'm going to go in between. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush. I'm going to hold my brush up here and not do it like a scrub brush. Let me show you. Before we continue, I'm going to show you. This is my one that we did before. And when I scrub the brush in this metal piece, if I scrub hard and I'm hearing this sound, it's kind of like scraping sound. That's scratching the paper. And then when you scratch the paper, I'll hold this up a little bit, it permanently puts grooves in the paper. And then see all these little pieces here? That's the paper started falling apart. So we don't want to scratch the paper. So when you're painting, make sure that you don't scrub and rub hard. Wipe that off with the paintbrush. We just want to use the brush part, and we don't ever want the metal touching on the surface. So I'm using the tip. If I want to cut, cover areas that are smaller, remember I can twirl my brush like this and lift it up and not have such a big blob. Okay, and then I can have a little bit more control. So I'm just going to kind of fill in these little areas, and then I'm going to just go straight down here like that, and I can kind of do it in rows. So I'll do that one, and then I'll do this second row, and I'll fill in. Need to add a little more water. I'll fill in a little bit around the leaf, and then I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and then I'll fill in these little sides. So you'll notice that it's, if I have, oops, I went too fast and I dripped into my brown. I'll have to clean that up. If I have enough water, it's going to resist being on the wax, okay? So I'm going to go down this column here, and I'm going row by row, and then I'm just going to fill in here, here, here. And what's going to happen now, all my little, looks like my little mosaic tiles are going to stand out better. They're kind of popping out, and it's looking more like a mosaic. I've got pencil lines in here in between because where I did my lines in drawing, but they're going to just disappear under the black lines, so I don't have to worry about those. So I'm going to fill in here. Okay. Do this last column. There, fill in there. Around the leaf, on the outside there. Okay, so once I have everything filled in, I'm going to look and see if there's any white spots, any places I missed as far as the covering with the black paint. So I'm going to do that. If I, let me just show you, if I have the paint too thick and I paint on the, it's like I've colored too well, but if I have the paint too thick and I color on there, it's gonna hang on there a little bit too much, but I've colored so well, it's really hard. But see how it's a little bit thick there? Oh, hold on, my lights are going off again. Okay, so once I have all the white filled in, and I don't see any white, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'm not going to go directly from the paint anymore. I'm going to go in the water, and then I'm going to just borrow some of the paint that is on my paper. And I'm just going to go in the water, dab it. I don't want a lot of water, and just put it a little bit in the black. And then I'm going to go one row at a time, and I'm just going to go down my pumpkin. And I'm going to just do a simple, almost like I'm doing it almost like I'm just touching it like a feather. I don't want to do this and just put puddles and just rub and rub and rub. Because see how it makes it disappear? Because I've rubbed it too much. So we don't want to have any squares disappear. So I'm going to dab that up. And I don't want you to plan on dabbing and going back and forth because it kind of dulls the crayon if you do that. So I'm just doing that to show you but what we're going to do. But you're just going to add a little water and then borrow a little paint. And then you're just going to go down the column and you're just going to add, and it's going to just create some little droplets on each of the little mosaic shapes. And that'll just give it some texture and just give it some interest, okay? You don't have to do it a lot, but it kind of gives it a little bit more personality instead of just leaving it plain. And then if there were some areas that you hadn't colored well and a little black got in there, it won't look like a mistake because it's an overall texture all over the whole pumpkin. So, but you have to have water in your brush or it won't work. So just borrow from the paint on the paper and then go through there and do that. If you want to do the same with the leaves, you can. I can do it on the stem. I can do it on the whole picture. But what I don't want you to do is this. I don't want you to go and say, okay, I want texture, so I'm going to put polka dots. And I don't want you to do a dot there, a dot there, a dot there, a dot there. It'll look too intentional, like you made polka dots. You see the difference? I don't know if you can see that close up or not. I'll bring it up, but see right here, looks like polka dots. We don't want to have the polka dots. So we just want it to be random. So I'm gonna try to wipe those off, clean my brush off and just kind of wipe those off. But we don't want a lot of little black things and we want it to look random. So I'm gonna go do it a little bit more and put some maybe on my leaves and on the stem. And it's almost like I'm tickling somebody with a feather. My dad used to fall asleep in the den when we would be sitting watching TV or something, and sometimes I'd have like a feather and I'd go up and tickle his nose to see if I could kind of wake him up and then I would kind of sneak away so he wouldn't know what it was and he would shake his head. But think of just tickling somebody with a feather, really gently doing it, not, not rubbing, not abrupt. Okay, so I'm all covered. Now, I'm not going to do any more painting on top of any of the sections as far as the crayon parts. But I do notice there's some lightness there. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to bring my little black pod back to life. If it got a little bit dry, I'm going to add a little bit more water. Remember, we don't want to dig in there. We don't want globs and chunks because it won't work with the wax. So I'm going to just do a second layer. Remember, I did a little bit thin here to show you if you didn't do it thick enough. So I'm going to add a second layer of the black. And when it dries, it's going to dry a little bit lighter. So once it dries, like this is drying, it looks lighter than that. In the end, it'll look black, and we can actually spray it with a fixative that'll kind of bring the shine back when you guys are back at school. I have some spray I can put on, but it will dry a little bit lighter, but we want it to have a nice darkness to begin with. So you might go on that, probably more the borders. You don't need to go on the in-between so much, but I did it lighter in here. And that was kind of on purpose to kind of show you guys the contrast. So make sure it's got good coverage. Make sure you don't have any white on your edges because we want it nice and clean. We'll probably mount these with some paper. We'll put like a colored paper behind it. I usually do orange, or sometimes I'll do a bright green, and then you'll have a nice clean black line against the mounting paper, which will border our picture, and it will make it stand out and show up really well. I got a little bit of white there, so I'm covering that. A little bit of white on this corner here. So get your edges covered quite well, and make sure you're adding water to the paint. Stir it up. If it gets a little bit dry, add a little bit more water. And we're just going to make sure we have good coverage, and then we'll let it dry. If you're working at home and you're going to eat dinner at the table you just painted at, you're going to probably have to move your artwork somewhere. I probably wouldn't put it outside, especially if it was like yesterday was a really windy day. Your artwork would just blow away, and you may never know where it blew to. It might blow to your neighbor's yard. They might find a really pretty picture in their yard. But if there's a place you can set it, you can just pick up the whole placemat and move it, but you want to keep your, I'm going to reinforce that right there, and reinforce this one. But I'm not going to paint on any of my squares, because I don't want to make them, I don't want to rub them out or get too much paint there, so I can just paint a little bit in between if I need to, but only where it needs it. Okay, so I'm done. When I pick up my picture, I don't want to put my thumbs on it or my fingers on it. If I can pick up the whole placemat, I would do that. If I can't, I'm just going to get under it, and I'm going to carry it like this. I'm going to have my hand so it kind of keeps it from falling. I don't want to pick it up and go like that because the paint might flow down and ruin my picture. So I want to keep it as flat as can be. I'm going to take it over to the drying rack that we have in our classroom, and that's a really nice, safe place to put it. So that's what I'm going to do with mine. So there we go.